The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I remember because I was standing at the nurse's station, charting vitals, my pen still in my hand when my phone lit up with my father's name. I answered, and his voice was strange, hollowed out, like he was reading lines from a script he hadn't rehearsed. "Your mother collapsed," he said. "They're taking her to Mercy General." I drove 23 minutes with my hands welded to the steering wheel. I ran a light on Broadway. I left my car diagonal across 2 spaces in the ER lot.
When I burst through the automatic doors, a charge nurse I knew from the pediatric floor caught me by the elbow. Her face was the one I'd seen 100 times, the one you wear when you have to tell someone their world just ended. "Aneurysm," she said. It was fast. They said she didn't suffer. I don't know who those words are supposed to comfort, but they never comforted me. My father was already at the admitting desk. He was signing paperwork with a pen that moved quick and steady, like he was closing a credit card account. A woman from the Crestwood Funeral Home stood beside him, a brochure spread open on the counter. He'd already picked the casket, already confirmed the viewing hours, already chosen white roses. My mother hated white roses. She loved sunflowers, the big, messy kind that looked like they belonged in a field instead of a vase. But I couldn't make my mouth form that sentence. Not yet. "Dad," I said, "when did you get here?" "About an hour ago," he said. He put a hand on my shoulder. "I handled everything. You don't need to worry about any of this." That night, I went to my parents' house to sit in her bedroom. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand, right where she'd left them. Her library book was still open, face down, spine cracking, holding her place. But the drawer in her nightstand, the one she always kept locked, was empty, cleaned out. The little silver key she wore on a chain around her neck was gone. My mother had been dead for 6 hours, and her most private space was already bare. The next morning, I drove back to help plan the service. The front door was unlocked. I heard music, something soft and instrumental, the kind my mother never played, drifting from the kitchen. A woman I had never seen before was standing at my mother's stove, pouring coffee into my mother's favorite yellow mug. She was wearing my mother's cream-colored cardigan, the one with the mother-of-pearl buttons that my mom had re-sewn herself. "Audrey," my father said, stepping out of the hallway. "She's a close friend. She's been helping me through this." Audrey Kellerman smiled at me the way you smile at a child you've just met at a party. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sweetheart." I had never heard her name before, not once. I asked about my mom's office, the little room off the den where she kept her files, her paperwork, the folders she called her important papers. My father waved his hand. "I cleaned all that out. Your mother kept so much clutter in there. The filing cabinet was empty. The desk drawers were bare. Even the corkboard above her desk, where she used to pin appointment cards and receipts, had been stripped clean. My father sat at the kitchen table and took over the funeral arrangements. Music, speakers, guest list, flowers. When I asked if I could read the eulogy, he shook his head. "I think it's better if I do it, Claire. You'll get too emotional." Audrey touched my arm. "Your dad knows best, sweetie." That's when I saw it. On Audrey's wrist, a thin gold bracelet engraved with the name Evelyn. I had given my mother that bracelet for her birthday when I was 16. I'd saved for months, babysitting and dog walking. "Oh, this old thing," Audrey said, turning her wrist. "Your father said your mother wouldn't mind." I opened my mouth, then I closed it. Because if I reacted then, if I raised my voice or let my face twist, my father would use it. He would tell everyone I was unstable. So I said quietly, actually, she would. That was a gift from me. No one answered. Thursday evening, visitation at Crestwood Funeral Home. The viewing room smelled like carpet cleaner and chilled flowers, white roses everywhere. My father stood at the entrance in a charcoal suit, greeting every person who walked through the door. Handshake, hug, red-rimmed eyes. He held the hand of every woman who offered it a beat too long, and they all said the same thing. "Oh, Richard, you poor man." I stood 3 feet to his left, but most people glanced at me, nodded politely, then turned back to him. A few patted my arm. One woman said, "You must be the daughter," as if I needed an introduction at my own mother's viewing. I heard my father lean toward a family friend, a man named Carl from the old neighborhood, and lower his voice just enough that I caught every word. "Evelyn had been struggling mentally," he said. "The last few years were hard on all of us." Carl shook his head. "I had no idea." "Richard, she made some unusual financial decisions toward the end." I tried to help, but she wouldn't listen. My skin went cold. He was standing 10 feet from her open casket, and he was rewriting her story for an audience. My Uncle Mark, my father's younger brother, found me by the guest book. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder. "Your dad, been carrying this family on his back, Claire. Try to be strong for him." I nodded because I didn't trust my mouth. Later, alone, I stood in front of my mother's casket. Her hands were folded. Her nails were painted the soft pink she always wore. Her face looked calm, arranged, like someone else's idea of her. I leaned close enough that no one behind me could hear. "What were you trying to tell me, Mom?" The roses didn't answer, but something in the hallway was about to. The parking lot was almost empty when I pushed through the side door of the funeral home. The air was sharp and October cold, and I just needed 1 minute where nobody touched my shoulder and called me sweetheart. A man was leaning against the brick wall near the dumpsters. Silver hair, a worn corduroy jacket. He looked like a retired professor waiting for a bus that stopped running years ago. "Miss Ashford," he said. I stopped. "Do I know you?" "No, but I knew your mother." He stepped forward. His hands were steady, but his eyes were not. "My name is Walter Pemberton. I was your mother's attorney. I need 5 minutes, attorney." My mother didn't have an attorney. My father handled everything. Every contract, every policy, every account. He always said Mom didn't understand that stuff. Walter walked me to the far end of the lot, away from the building, away from the windows. "Your father has been lying to you your entire life," he said. His voice was quiet, and even the way someone talks when they have rehearsed a sentence for months. "There is a second will, one he doesn't want found. And if he discovers that you know about it, you are in danger." He reached into his coat pocket and pressed a small key into my hand, a brass key with a plastic tag. A number was written on the tag in my mother's handwriting. "Your mother prepared for this, Claire. She didn't trust that she would be alive to tell you herself. Why should I believe you?" Walter opened a worn leather folder and removed a single photograph. My mother, seated at a desk, signing a document, smiling faintly. On her wrist, the gold bracelet with her name. "I made a promise to Evelyn," he said. "I intend to keep it." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Check the unit tonight. Your father filed his version of the will this morning." 9 p.m. The storage facility sat behind a closed gas station on Route 9. The kind of place where people keep lawnmowers and holiday decorations. Fluorescent lights buzzed over numbered roll-up doors. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to fit the key. The door rattled up. Inside, 3 cardboard boxes on a metal shelf. My mother's handwriting was on every label. Box 1. 12 leather-bound journals, numbered 1 through 12, spines cracked from use. Box 2. Manila folders thick with paperwork. Bank statements, insurance documents, photocopies of the deed to the house. Box 3 held a single large envelope. Written across the front in blue ink for Claire. "Open first." I sat on the cold concrete floor and tore the seal. 4 pages. My mother's handwriting, small, precise, unwavering. The first line. "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Your father is not who you think he is." The letter was organized the way Mom organized everything. Numbered points, dates, references to documents. In the second box, she wrote that my father took control of every bank account within the first 3 years of their marriage. That he moved $210,000 she inherited from my grandmother into a joint account, then transferred it piece by piece to an account in his name alone. That he changed the beneficiary on her life insurance policy from me to himself 4 years ago without her signature. And she wrote, "He told me if I ever said a word, he would make sure you believed I was crazy." I was too afraid to leave, but I was not too afraid to prepare. At the bottom of the letter, one more line. "He took my money. He took my voice. Don't let him take yours." I closed the envelope. I opened box 2, and I started counting. The documents told a story my father never wanted told. He filed his version of my mother's will with the county probate court at 9:14 that morning, 12 hours after her viewing, before the flowers on her casket had wilted. In his version, everything went to him. The house, the joint savings, the life insurance. I received a trust of $30,000 administered by Richard Ashford. But in the second box, paperclipped to a sheet of my mother's notes, was another will, dated 6 months after his. Notarized by an independent notary public. 2 witnesses, clear language. The house goes to me. The savings go to me. And a separate life insurance policy I never knew existed, $250,000 with me as sole beneficiary, was referenced by policy number. My mother also left a handwritten note clipped to the will. Under state law, the later dated valid will supersedes all prior versions. Walter will explain. I understood now. If I did nothing, if I stayed quiet, if I stayed the good daughter, let my father handle everything, the court would accept his filing. The house, the accounts, everything my mother built, everything that was stolen from her would land in his hands. Legally. And the journals, the statements, the letter, all of it would become meaningless paper in a storage unit no one would ever open again. I called Walter at 11. What do I do? We file tomorrow, he said, and we need a forensic accountant. But Claire, you cannot let your father know, not yet. When I hung up, my phone buzzed. My father. Where have you been? It's late. I kept my voice flat. I went for a drive. I needed air. 3 seconds of silence. Then, okay, don't forget the will reading is Thursday. 3 days. I had 3 days to keep my father from learning that the woman he thought he had silenced had just spoken from the grave. I didn't sleep. I carried the boxes to my apartment and sat cross-legged on the living room floor under a single lamp and opened journal number 1. My mother started writing when I was 6 years old. The first entry was dated April 3rd. She described my father asking her to transfer Grandma's inheritance, $210,000, into their joint account. For the family, he said, so I can manage it properly. Within 4 months, she noted the balance dropped by half. She asked where the money went, and he told her she wouldn't understand. Journal 2, I'm 8. She wrote about my birthday party, the one I remembered being canceled because Mom was sick. Except she wasn't sick. Richard called the venue and canceled it this morning. He told Claire I had a migraine. I was in the kitchen making her cake when he walked in and said, I told her you're not feeling well. I asked him why. He said because I decided we're not spending that money. Claire came home from school and wouldn't look at me. I remembered that day. I remembered thinking my mother forgot. I remembered my father sitting on the edge of my bed that night saying, Mom's just tired, sweetheart. She tries her best. He used me. He used a child to build a wall between my mother and me, and I carried the bricks for him for 25 years without knowing it. Journal 3, I'm 11. Mom tries to open her own checking account. Richard finds the statement in the mail. That night she wrote, he told the Hendersons at dinner that I've been acting strange. I'm worried about her, he said. They looked at me like I was broken. She was documenting. Every entry dated, every claim cross-referenced. My mother wasn't fragile. She was building a record. Tuesday night, I spread the financial documents across my kitchen table like autopsy photographs. My mother had highlighted every anomaly in yellow. Sticky notes in her handwriting flagged the worst ones. She was methodical. She was patient. She was furious in the quietest possible way. The bank statement spanned 15 years. The transfers followed a pattern. 3,000 here, 5,000 there, 8,000 in December. Always just below the threshold that would trigger a flag. Over 15 years, roughly $340,000 moved from joint accounts into accounts bearing only my father's name. Accounts my mother was never added to. Accounts at a bank 2 towns over. Then there was the life insurance. My mother's policy, $500,000, originally nomming me as beneficiary, was changed 4 years ago. The new beneficiary, Richard Ashford. The signature on the change form was supposed to be my mother, but she had placed the original next to a photocopy and circled the differences. The slant was wrong. The E in Evelyn didn't loop the way hers did. She couldn't prove it alone, but she knew. And she prepared a countermove I was only now understanding. 3 years ago, without telling my father, she purchased a separate life insurance policy through Walter's office. $250,000. Beneficiary Claire Ashford. My father's name appeared nowhere on the document. I also found, stapled to the back of a bank statement, a handwritten list titled Forged. 2 entries. 2 documents where someone signed Evelyn Ashford's name, and it wasn't Evelyn Ashford. I sat back in the chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. $340,000. 25 years. That was the price he put on my mother's silence. And the forgery, that wasn't just financial abuse anymore. That was a crime with a name. Wednesday morning, one day before the reading, I drove to my parents' house because that is what a good daughter does. And right now, I needed my father to believe I was exactly the daughter he raised me to be. He was at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, relaxed, coffee steaming, like a man whose largest concern was the weather. Morning, sweetheart. Want some eggs? Sure, Dad. He cracked 2 eggs into the pan. I met with the attorney yesterday, he said. Everything is straightforward. Don't worry about the finances. I'll take care of you. Did Mom ever talk to you about her wishes? He didn't turn around. Your mother didn't have a head for those things. I heard the front door open. Audrey walked in carrying a grocery bag. She was wearing a ring I recognized. My mother's amethyst ring, the one Mom wore on her right hand every Sunday for as long as I could remember. Richard said I should hold on to some of Evelyn's things, Audrey said, setting the bag on the counter. For safekeeping. I smiled, I nodded, I ate the eggs. In the car, I called Walter. We file the second will tomorrow morning first thing. Already in motion, he said. I've contacted Dana Reeves, a forensic accountant. Her report will be ready by Thursday. Good. I hung up and sat in the driveway for a moment. Through the kitchen window, I could see my father laughing at something Audrey said. He looked comfortable. He looked certain. When I pulled out, he was standing at the window watching my car. His face was not grieving. It was calculating. That was the last lie I ever told him. Sure, Dad. Spoken over a plate of eggs in my dead mother's kitchen while her ring sat on another woman's finger. Sitting in that car outside my mother's house, I genuinely asked myself, am I overreacting? Is this just a clumsy, grief-stricken man who doesn't know how to handle a funeral? Or is this really the person who stole my mother's entire life while she was still living it? If you found that letter, those journals, those bank statements, would you trust them immediately? Or would you doubt yourself the way I did sitting in that driveway watching him laugh through the window? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. Wednesday morning, 8:45. Walter Pemberton met me at the county courthouse before the clerk's window was even open. He was carrying a leather briefcase older than I was and wearing the same corduroy jacket. He looked like he hadn't slept much either, but his hands were steady and his voice was clear. We file now, he said, before your father's attorney can push the first will through processing. I watched the clerk stamp the document. I watched her log the case number. The second will, my mother's real will, dated 6 months after the one my father filed, was now part of the official record. Walter explained in the hallway, keeping his voice low. Under state probate law, when two valid wills exist, the later dated instrument controls. Your father's will was drafted 5 years ago. Your mother was executed 2.5 years ago, notarized by an independent notary public, witnessed by 2 individuals who are alive and willing to testify. What if he says she was mentally unfit? Walter paused. He expected this question. That's exactly what he'll try. It's why he's been telling everyone she was struggling and confused. He's been building that narrative for years, Claire, but your mother anticipated it. He tapped the briefcase. 12 journals, detailed, dated, cross-referenced to financial records. A forensic accountant's report confirming the transactions. 2 witnesses who sat in the room when she signed, who will testify she was lucid, determined, and fully aware of what she was doing. He looked at me over his glasses. Your mother didn't just make a will. She built a fortress around it. I nodded. My throat was tight, but my voice was not. What about tomorrow, the reading? Tomorrow we let your father go first. We let him finish. Then I walk in. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in Walter's small office above the hardware store on Main Street, the kind of office with a window air conditioner and a framed law degree from 1985, and listened to Dana Reeves's voice through the speakerphone. Dana was a forensic accountant Walter had worked with before. She'd been reviewing the documents since yesterday morning, and she sounded like a woman who had seen this pattern 100 times and was still angry about it. Approximately $340,000 transferred from joint accounts to accounts solely in Richard Ashford's name over a 15-year period, she said. Multiple transfers structured below reporting thresholds. Beneficiary changes on the primary life insurance policy executed without verified cosigner consent. 2 signatures on banking documents that do not match Evelyn Ashford's authenticated samples. She paused. This is textbook elder financial abuse. If the district attorney's office wants to examine this, there is more than sufficient documentation. Walter muted the phone and looked at me. We'll have the written summary printed and ready for tomorrow. I'm making 3 copies. 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for Dana's records. What happens at the reading? Your father's attorney will present his will. He'll read it aloud. People will nod. Then I'll enter the room and present ours, and the forensic report. I'll have a printed summary available if his attorney questions the validity. But Claire, the will speaks for itself. The report is the hammer behind it. I helped Walter organize the copies. Bank statements in chronological order. Insurance documents tabbed. The 2 pages with forged signatures flagged with red sticky notes. Your mother didn't just protect you, Walter said quietly, straightening a stack. She built a case. All we had to do was present it. The paper trail doesn't lie. Tomorrow, neither will I. Wednesday evening. My father hosted what he called a family dinner at the house. The house that still smelled like my mother's lavender sachets in the closets, though I doubted they'd last long. He'd invited everyone. Aunts, cousins, neighbors, old coworkers from the bank. Audrey was in the kitchen wearing my mother's apron, stirring a pot of chili with my mother's wooden spoon, and something about the image was so precise in its wrongness that I had to look away. Richard stood at the head of the table and raised his glass. Evelyn would have wanted us together. Tomorrow we make things official, and then we move forward as a family. Uncle Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, satisfied. Here, here, I ate. I smiled when spoken to. I complimented the chili. I was performing the role of grieving daughter so convincingly that it scared me a little. Audrey pulled a neighbor aside near the buffet to show off a pendant necklace. I recognized it immediately. My mother's small gold locket, the one with baby photos of me inside. Richard gave it to me, she said. Isn't it beautiful? I watched the neighbor's face tighten for half a second before she nodded. After dinner, my father caught me at the door. You okay, kiddo? I'm fine, Dad. See you tomorrow. In the car, I sat in the dark and thought about my mother sitting at the same table for 28 years, smiling the way I just smiled, performing the way I just performed. Except she did it every single day. Tomorrow, I keep my promise. As I pulled away, I saw my father through the window, standing at my mother's desk, going through her wallet. He took out her last bank card. He didn't know that account had been frozen this morning. In 12 hours, every person at that dinner table would know who Richard Ashford really was. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Crestwood Funeral Home, Conference Room B. My father had arranged 30 chairs in neat rows facing a small podium. 30 chairs for a will reading. Normally, this was a private affair. Immediate family, maybe a close friend. But Richard Ashford had turned this into a public event. I scanned the room as people filed in. Aunts and uncles, cousins I saw twice a year, neighbors from Cedar Street, Carl from the old neighborhood, Bob Hensley, my father's golf partner of 20 years, 2 women from my mother's garden club. A man I recognized from the bank where my father worked before retirement. 30 witnesses. My father wanted an audience. He stood near the front in a pressed navy suit, shaking hands, accepting condolences with practiced humility. Audrey sat in the front row, legs crossed in a new black dress. Not my mother's clothes today, at least. Uncle Mark took the seat beside Audrey, arms folded, jaw set. The enforcer. At the podium, a man I hadn't met arranged papers inside a leather folder. Philip Corrigan, my father's attorney. Mid-50s, good suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being questioned in a room like this. I sat in the third row, quiet, hands in my lap. I looked exactly like what my father expected me to be. The emotional daughter who would nod along and sign whatever was placed in front of her. My phone was in my pocket. I sent one text under the edge of my purse. I'm here, third row. Walter's reply came in 4 seconds. I'm in the parking lot. I'll wait for my signal. The room filled. The door closed. Philip Corrigan cleared his throat and the performance began. Philip Corrigan read with the smooth authority of a man who had done this 100 times. He held the document at chest height and spoke in measured paragraphs, as if he were narrating something noble. The last will and testament of Evelyn Ashford, dated April 12, 2019. 5 years ago, when my mother was still smiling in photographs, and my father was still telling everyone what a devoted husband he was. The terms were simple and brutal. The house on Cedar Street, appraised at approximately $400,000, goes to Richard. The joint savings account goes to Richard. The life insurance policy, $500,000, goes to Richard. Claire Ashford receives a trust of $30,000 to be administered by Richard Ashford. $30,000, managed by him. Out of everything my mother worked for, everything she inherited, everything she saved, I got an allowance controlled by the man who took it all. Corrigan set the paper down. My father stood. Evelyn and I discussed this many times, he said. His voice cracked just enough to sound genuine. She wanted me to make sure Claire is taken care of. I'll manage things responsibly, as I always have. Heads nodded. Uncle Mark said loud enough for the back row. That sounds fair. Richard's always been the responsible one. A woman behind me whispered to her husband. Poor Richard. My father turned to me. 30 people watching. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. I know this is a lot, sweetheart, but I'll take care of everything. You don't need to think about money. Then quieter, but not quiet enough. Claire's like her mother, wonderful heart, but not great with numbers. A few people chuckled softly. Margaret Ellison, my mother's oldest friend, did not chuckle. She was watching me with steady, unblinking eyes. I let the silence sit for 3 beats. Then I said calmly, "Can I say something?" My father smiled. He thought I was going to thank him. He stepped aside and gestured toward the room like a host offering a microphone. Of course, sweetheart, I stood. My voice was level. I just want to understand. Mom worked for 28 years. She inherited money from Grandma. She paid into her life insurance for over 2 decades. And everything goes to you. The room shifted. Not dramatically, just a slight tightening. A few people glanced at each other. My father's smile faded by a degree. Claire, this isn't the time. We talked about this. We never talked about this. Not once. Uncle Mark leaned forward. Come on, Claire, your dad. Been the one paying the bills for 30 years. Don't make this about money. Audrey shifted in her chair and said just loud enough, poor thing. She's been so emotional since Evelyn passed. Maybe she needs some time. My father lowered his voice into the register he used when he wanted a room to believe he was concerned rather than angry. See, this is what I was worried about. She's not in the right headspace to deal with these things. And there it was, the playbook. Exactly what my mother described in her letter. Step 1, dismiss. Step 2, diagnose. Step 3, control. 30 people were looking at me now, some with sympathy, some with discomfort. A few with the expression people wear when they think they're watching a fragile woman unravel. Uncle Mark muttered, "Girls and money don't mix. Your daddy knows what's best." I looked down at my phone. One new message from Walter. "I'm at the door." My father turned to Philip Corrigan. "I think we're done here." Corrigan nodded and began gathering the papers. The room exhaled. People started reaching for their coats, their purses. It was over. Richard Ashford had staged his performance, and the audience was ready to go home believing exactly what he wanted them to believe. Richard took Audrey's hand and faced the room. "I appreciate everyone coming." Evelyn would be touched. Uncle Mark stood and clapped once. "Let's give Richard some peace. The man just lost his wife." This was the moment. I rose from the 3rd row. My hands were trembling slightly, but my voice was not. "Actually, we're not done." Every head turned. Richard's jaw tightened. "Claire, sit down. I'd like to introduce someone." The door to conference room B opened. Walter Pemberton stepped through with his worn leather briefcase in one hand. He was wearing the same corduroy jacket. He looked like a man who had been waiting 3 years to walk through this exact door. My father saw him, and I watched something I had never seen before on Richard Ashford's face. Fear. Not surprise, not confusion. Fear. The specific, electric fear of a man who recognized the one loose end he failed to tie. Because he knew Walter's name. My mother had mentioned him once during an argument 2 years ago, and my father dismissed it, told her she was making things up. He thought she was bluffing. She was. Walter set his briefcase on the podium and addressed the room. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Walter Pemberton, and I was Evelyn Ashford's attorney for the last 3 years of her life. I'm here because Evelyn asked me to be." I looked at my father. "Sit down, Dad. It's your turn to listen." Walter opened the briefcase with the care of a man handling evidence, which was exactly what this was. "Evelyn Ashford retained me in November 3 years ago. She came to my office alone. She was not confused. She was not impaired. She was afraid, not for herself, but for her daughter." He removed a document and held it so the front row could see the notary seal. "This is the last will and testament of Evelyn Ashford, executed 2.5 years ago. It was notarized by an independent notary public and witnessed by 2 individuals who are present in this room today." I heard Audrey inhale sharply. Uncle Mark's arms uncrossed for the first time all morning. Walter read the terms. The house on Cedar Street to Claire Ashford. The savings accounts to Claire Ashford. A separate life insurance policy, $250,000 to Claire Ashford. Richard Ashford receives nothing. My father was on his feet before Walter finished. "That's a forgery. My wife would never. The notary is on record, Mr. Ashford. Would you like me to call her?" Philip Corrigan, Richard's own attorney, reached for the document. Walter handed him a copy. Corrigan read it once, read it again, and then leaned toward my father. "Richard, sit down." Richard didn't sit. From the 2nd row, Margaret Ellison, my mother's best friend, 63 years old, silver-haired, quiet until now, stood. "I was a witness," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "I watched Evelyn sign that will. She was clear-headed and she was determined. And she told me if anything happens to me, make sure Claire knows. Walter addressed the room one more time. Under state probate law, the later dated valid will supersedes all prior versions. This will was filed with the county courthouse yesterday morning. The room was silent. 30 people, not one sound. The silence fractured when my father slammed his palm on the arm of his chair. This is ridiculous. Evelyn was confused. She didn't know what she was. I'd like to read something. I stood. I was holding my mother's letter. The paper was slightly creased from where I had pressed it to my chest 2 nights ago on the floor of a storage unit. Not all of it, just enough. I read 3 sentences, my mother's words, in my voice, in a room full of people who thought they knew our family. He took control of every dollar I earned. He made me ask permission to buy groceries. And when I tried to tell someone, he told them I was losing my mind. Doris Reed, the woman who had lived next door to my parents for 40 years, who brought casseroles every Christmas, who waved to my mother across the fence every morning, put her hand over her mouth. Carl stared at the floor. The 2 women from the garden club turned to each other with wide eyes. She was sick, my father said. His voice had climbed half an octave. She didn't know what she was writing. I did not raise my voice. She dated every entry. She cross-referenced bank statements. She kept receipts for 12 years, Dad. Uncle Mark pushed up from his chair. This is a setup. You're trying to steal from your own father. Sit down, Mark, Margaret Ellison, voice like a door closing. For once in your life, sit down and listen. Mark sat. The room was rearranging itself. I could feel it. The way 30 people quietly revised a story they had believed for decades. The concerned husband, the unstable wife, the emotional daughter. My mother had spent 25 years being told she was crazy. My voice was steady. She wasn't crazy. She was documenting. Walter placed his phone on the podium and pressed the speaker button. This is Dana Reeves, certified forensic accountant. I was retained to examine the financial records of Evelyn and Richard Ashford. Dana's voice filled the room. Professional, precise, unhurried. The voice of someone who testifies in courtrooms and doesn't flinch. My analysis covers a 15-year period. Approximately $340,000 was transferred from joint accounts into accounts held solely by Richard Ashford. The transfers were structured in amounts designed to avoid automated detection. Beneficiary changes on the primary life insurance policy were executed without verified cosigner consent. Additionally, 2 signatures on banking documents do not match Evelyn Ashford's authenticated handwriting samples. She paused. The pattern is consistent with elder financial abuse as defined under state statute. Walter lifted a printed summary from his briefcase and walked it directly to Philip Corrigan. Corrigan took the pages. He read the first paragraph, turned to the second, and then set the document face down on his lap. He leaned toward Richard. I could not hear what he said, but I saw my father's face drain of color. Richard turned to the room. This is lies, all of it, every word. No one responded. Bob Hensley, my father's golf partner of 20 years, stood up slowly, picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, and walked out of the room without a word. Audrey, who had been sitting rigid in the front row, pulled her hand away from my father's arm. She moved it to her own lap. It was a small gesture, but everyone in the front 2 rows saw it. My father was standing in the center of a room full of people he had known for decades. And for the first time, not a single one of them was looking at him with sympathy. You're all being manipulated, he said, by a dead woman. No one moved. My father turned to me. His eyes were wet and his voice was shaking, but it wasn't grief. It was the sound of a man watching the walls come down. After everything I've done for you, I raised you, I fed you, I gave you a home. You can speak to my attorney. Dad, you're making a mistake, Claire. You'll regret this. Mom made a decision. I'm honoring it. Walter stepped forward and addressed the room one final time. The second will has been filed with the county court and is now part of the official probate record. Additionally, the financial evidence documented by Mrs. Ashford and confirmed by forensic analysis will be forwarded to the county district attorney's office for review. District attorney landed in the room like a dropped glass. Doris Reed turned to her husband. 2 cousins in the back row stood and moved toward the door. Uncle Mark hadn't said a word in 5 minutes. Richard looked around the room. He turned a full circle, searching for an ally, someone who would tell him this was wrong. Someone who would take his side. His eyes passed over Carl, who looked away, over the women from the garden club who stared at their laps, over Audrey, who was now standing in the far corner of the room, arms wrapped around herself, over Mark, who sat with his jaw clenched and his eyes on the carpet. No one met his gaze. I collected my purse from the 3rd row. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone. My mother asked me to protect what she built. That's what I'm doing. I walked toward the door. As I passed my father, he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. I looked him directly in the eyes and pulled my arm free. Don't touch me. I said it clearly. I said it once. I walked out into the October sunlight. Behind me, I heard his voice. High, cracking, desperate. She's lying, but no one followed him out. 24 hours later, the calls began. Philip Corrigan phoned Walter's office at 9 a.m. Friday morning. I sat across from Walter and listened on speaker. I've reviewed the documentation you provided, Corrigan said. His voice was different today, stripped of the authority he had worn at the reading. I've advised my client not to contest the second will. The evidentiary record is substantial. Walter nodded at me. We appreciate the call, Philip. There's one more thing, Corrigan said. I'll be withdrawing as Richard's counsel effective today. Given the nature of the allegations, I'm unable to continue representation while maintaining my obligations to the bar. Richard's own attorney had fired him. Walter hung up and opened a folder. I've sent a formal letter to your father, requesting that he and any non-family occupants vacate the property within 30 days per the probate agreement. And the DA. The forensic report and supporting documents were forwarded to the county district attorney's office this morning. They've opened a preliminary review. That afternoon, my phone showed 6 missed calls from my father. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemails later in order. The first one was rage. You think you can steal from me after everything? The second was bargaining. Let's talk about this. We can work something out. The third was a threat. I'll fight this. I'll fight you in court. The fourth was weeping. No words, just the sound of a 63-year-old man crying into a phone. And even through everything, through the forgery and the theft and the gaslighting and the 25 years of lies, I felt something twist in my chest. Not forgiveness. Just the ache of recognizing that the man I loved as my father had actually existed somewhere inside the man who did all this. I deleted the voicemails and closed my phone. In a town this small, 30 witnesses may as well be a billboard. By Monday, the story had made its rounds, not the tabloid version. The quiet kind, whispered over coffee at the diner, mentioned between sets at the Rotary luncheon, discussed in lowered voices at the post office. Margaret Ellison called me on Tuesday. Honey, I knew your mama was hurting, but I didn't know how bad. I should have pushed harder. You were there when it mattered, Margaret. You signed that will. She was quiet for a moment. She was so calm that day, sat in Walter's office and signed like she was paying a water bill, but her hands were shaking under the table. Bob Hensley called Richard to cancel their standing Wednesday golf game. He didn't give a reason, just said, I need some space, Rich. Richard knew what that meant. Richard went to the Rotary Club that Thursday. People were polite. No one was rude, but no one saved him a seat. And when he sat at a table with 3 men he'd known for 20 years, the conversation died until he excused himself. The small humiliations of a small town. No one confronted him. No one had to. Audrey moved her things out of the house on Wednesday. She left quietly. No scene, no argument. On the kitchen table, she placed every piece of my mother's jewelry she had taken. The locket, the amethyst ring, the gold bracelet engraved with Evelyn. She didn't leave a note. I didn't think Audrey left because she realized my father was wrong. I thought she left because the money was gone. That was an uglier truth, but it was the real one. Uncle Mark called me Saturday morning. His voice was thick. Claire, I didn't know. I know Uncle Mark, but I didn't invite him to the house. 3 weeks after the funeral, the probate court accepted the second will. The house on Cedar Street officially transferred to my name. The separate life insurance policy, $250,000, cleared into my account. The joint savings, approximately $85,000, remained frozen pending the DA's review, but Walter told me it was only a matter of time. Richard did not challenge the will. Philip Corrigan, in his final communication, confirmed. My former client has elected not to contest. He didn't explain why, but I knew. Challenging the will would make the forensic report a public court record. Every highlighted bank statement, every forged signature, every journal entry entered into evidence for anyone to read. Richard may have been many things, but he wasn't stupid. He left town on a Tuesday, moved in with an old college roommate 2 states away. No forwarding address, no goodbye. The DA's office continued its review. Walter said it might take months, but the evidence was solid. Even if they didn't prosecute, the record existed. I changed the locks on a Thursday. A locksmith named Joe did the work in 40 minutes and said, nice house. Moving in, I grew up here. That evening, I walked through every room. I left my mother's bookshelves untouched. I watered the spider plant she kept by the kitchen window. It was still alive, which seemed like a small miracle. I returned the gold bracelet to her jewelry box in the bedroom, resting it on the velvet lining where it belonged. I opened the dresser, the one my father had emptied 6 hours after she died. The drawers were bare. But as I pulled the last one out to wipe it clean, something caught between the wood and the bottom panel. A small photograph. Me, 5 years old, sitting on my mother's lap, both of us laughing. He had cleaned out her dresser in 6 hours, but he missed the one thing that mattered. Let me be clear about what Richard Ashford lost, because I think the numbers matter. The house, 400,000, gone. It was my mother, before it was theirs. Purchased with her inheritance from my grandmother, and now it was mine. The separate life insurance, 250,000. The policy my mother took out in secret through Walter, with me as the sole beneficiary. Richard never knew it existed. And the joint savings, 85,000, frozen by court order pending investigation. His attorney withdrew. His golf partner stopped calling. His Rotary friends politely suggested he take a break from meetings. Audrey gone. She didn't leave because she had a moral reckoning. She left because the money left first. The 340,000 he had siphoned over 25 years spent. My mother's journals documented what she could track. A car he bought Audrey, 42,000. Roughly the same amount my mother secretly saved for me. Sports gambling trips she was never invited on. Gifts for a woman who wore my mother's jewelry before the casket was closed. The DA's preliminary review remained open. Walter said charges were not guaranteed. Many elder financial abuse cases didn't result in prosecution. But the file existed. The evidence existed. And if Richard Ashford ever tried to rewrite this story, there were 12 handwritten journals and a forensic report that said otherwise. He sent me a letter last week. 4 pages handwritten, which told me he'd been sitting somewhere with nothing but time. He didn't apologize. He wrote that he was misunderstood, that your mother always exaggerated things. I read it once. I folded it carefully. I placed it in the box with the rest of the evidence. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. It took me 2 weeks to finish the journals. The first 9 were painful. A catalog of small thefts and large silences. A woman watching her life be dismantled, one forged signature at a time. But the last 3 journals were different. In the final years, my mother stopped writing about Richard. She wrote about me. About the afternoons I came home to visit and we sat on the porch and drank iced tea. About the tomatoes she grew in the backyard and saved for me because she knew I loved them on sandwiches. About a book she read that made her think of me. She transcribed a passage and wrote beside it, "Claire would like this." Between journal entries, I found letters she wrote but never sent. "I'm sorry I didn't leave sooner. I was afraid he'd take you from me. By the time you were old enough to understand, I was too deep. Forgive me for that if you can." And this, an entry from 18 months before she died. I opened a 529 education fund in Claire's name 10 years ago. It's in the storage unit. Use it if you ever want to go back to school, baby. I checked the documents. She was right. A 529 account funded in quiet increments. $50 here, $100 there. Skimmed from the grocery budget my father gave her every month. Balance, approximately 18,000. Richard never noticed because he never looked at what she spent. He only looked at what she earned. 18,000. Built $50 at a time over a decade from a woman who had to ask permission to buy groceries. I sat on her bed holding the last journal and I cried for the first time since she died. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood the size of her love, measured not in what she said, but in what she hid from me. "I can't give her the world," she wrote. "But I can make sure he doesn't take it from her." I sent my father one email. It was 6 sentences long. "I won't be in contact for the foreseeable future. If you need to communicate regarding legal or financial matters, please direct all correspondence through Walter Pemberton. I wish you no harm, but I will not pretend. You may reach Walter at the number below." He replied the same day. His email was long, 9 paragraphs of justification, minimization, and revision. He wrote that my mother always had a flair for drama. He wrote that any financial decisions were made for the good of the family. He did not use the word sorry. I read it once. I did not reply. I met Uncle Mark at the coffee shop on Main Street the following Saturday. He looked smaller than I remembered. He ordered black coffee and stared at it. "Uncle Mark, I don't hate you. But you stood in that room and backed the man who robbed my mother. I need time. He nodded. I understand. It was the first time in his life he hadn't argued. I kept Margaret Ellison close. She came by the house every Thursday with banana bread and stories. How she and my mother met at a PTA meeting in 1998. How Mom once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring Margaret soup when she had the flu. How Mom laughed with her whole body when no one was watching. I sent handwritten thank you notes to Walter and Dana. Walter was retiring now, fully, officially. And he told me on the phone this was the last case. Evelyn would have wanted me to close it. The week after, Margaret mentioned something she'd been holding back. Your mama gave me a USB drive 2 years ago, said it was a backup of everything, in case the storage unit was ever found and emptied. My mother thought of everything, even the scenario where she lost. I wish you had been the father you pretended to be, I wrote in that email, but wishing doesn't change the records. There was a moment, reading those last journals, where I found myself wondering something I might never have the answer to. Did my mother ever forgive him? Not publicly, not legally. But in her heart, in the quiet of those journal pages, did she let go of it? Or did she carry that weight until the very end? I'll never know. But I want to ask you, if you discovered that the person you trusted most in this world had been lying to you your entire life, could you forgive them? Not should you. Could you? Tell me in the comments. I've been thinking about this for weeks. 2 months after the funeral, I moved into the house on Cedar Street. The first thing I did was paint the living room. My mother always wanted it a pale blue, the color of a winter sky just before it clears. My father said it was too feminine and kept it beige for 28 years. It took me a Saturday afternoon and 2 coats. And when the light came through the front windows the next morning, the room looked like a place my mother would have loved. I planted the garden. Lavender along the fence because she talked about it every spring and never did it. Tomatoes in the raised bed she built herself. Daisies, yellow, not white, beside the mailbox. Margaret brought over a climbing rose she found at the nursery on Route 9. Your mama wanted one of these for years. We planted together, kneeling in the dirt, and Margaret told me about the time my mother entered a tomato in the county fair and came in second and pretended she wasn't furious. I used the 529 fund to enroll in an online MSN program, Master of Science in Nursing. It was something I'd wanted for years. When I mentioned it once at a family dinner, my father said, "You don't need more school, Claire. You already have a job." Mom thought otherwise. She'd saved $18,000 for this, $50 at a time. I put a photo of her on the bookshelf in the living room, not the funeral portrait, a real one from a barbecue in 2016. She was holding a glass of lemonade and laughing at something off camera. Her eyes were bright. That was the version of her I wanted to see every day. Friday evening, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea and listened to the crickets. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's permission to be here. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I had a mother who loved me fiercely enough to plan 3 years ahead from inside a cage she couldn't escape. That's not a tragedy. That's a gift. I'm telling you because I know someone is listening right now who is living the life my mother lived. Someone whose partner controls every dollar. Someone who's been told by family, by friends, by the person sitting across from them at dinner, that they're too emotional, too sensitive, too confused to understand their own life. If that's you, I want to share 3 things I learned the hard way. First, if someone tells you you're crazy for questioning the math, check the receipts. My mother did. It took her years, but she built a record that couldn't be dismissed. You don't need a law degree. You need a notebook and the courage to write down what's real. Second, silence protects the person who benefits from it. It never protects you. My mother was silent for 25 years because she was told that silence was loyalty. And it wasn't loyalty. It was a leash. Third, you don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to show up with the truth. I didn't raise my voice in that room. I didn't need to. The documents spoke. The witnesses spoke. The numbers spoke. Truth is quiet and it is patient and it outlasts every lie ever told about you. I don't hate my father. I am disappointed in him in a way that I think will last the rest of my life. But I chose not to carry that with me. It's too heavy. And my mother already carried it long enough for both of us. She couldn't leave, but she made sure I could walk out standing up. I used to think being a good daughter meant being quiet. Now I know being a good daughter means finishing what my mother started. Here, where things stand today, Richard Ashford is living in another state with a college friend. The district attorney's office has not closed its review. I don't check for updates. Walter will call me when there's something to know. 3 weeks ago, my father sent me a text message. The last one I'll mention, you destroyed this family. I typed back 5 words. No, Dad, you did. 25 years ago, I haven't blocked his number. I don't need to. A boundary isn't a wall. It's just a decision you make once and keep making every day. I don't respond. I don't engage. I don't explain. Some mornings I pour coffee into my mother's yellow mug and sit at the kitchen table and feel her in the room. Not in a mystical way. Just in the way the light hits the counter the same way it always did. And the spider plant is still growing. And the house smells like lavender because I planted it where she always wanted it. I keep her last journal on my nightstand. Not to remind myself of what happened, but to remind myself that a woman with no power, no allies, no voice, found a way to protect her daughter from beyond the grave. She couldn't fight him while she was alive, so she armed me to fight him after she was gone. And if you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your family, a number that doesn't add up, a signature you didn't authorize, a question you're told not to ask, trust that feeling. Document it. Tell someone. Because the truth doesn't expire. It just waits. Thank you for staying until the end. If you know someone who might be experiencing financial control in their family, a partner, a parent, a friend who keeps saying it's fine when it clearly isn't, send them this story. Sometimes knowing that someone else walked through it and came out the other side is enough to make them start. If this story mattered to you, hit like and subscribe. I have more stories like this one, and they're all true in the ways that count. In the description below, I've linked another story I think you'll want to hear, about a woman who uncovered a family secret at the Thanksgiving dinner table that no one saw coming. I'll see you in the next one.